Hey, good morning, boys and girls. It is Friday, and we are going to finish walking with Miss Millie today. As you can see, Mrs. Smith washed and did her hair. I'm all put together finally for the first time, I think, in 6 weeks. So
for the first time in forever.
It is the first time in forever. All right, we're going to finish chapters 29 and 28, and we all know how yesterday's chapter ended. And with the loss of Miss Millie, and that's extremely sad. And I know a lot of you guys in your comments wanted to find out what was in that letter. Well, guess what? You're going to find out. So here we go. I knew just what I needed. The hat box. The hat box filled with all the treasures from Miss Millie. One of them might help Miss Millie on her journey. And if Miss Frankie was right, leaving her something just might help me say goodbye too. Although it was hard to imagine. But I had to at least try. Running upstairs to the bed I shared with Mama, I lifted up the corner of the gold bedspread, expecting to see the box sitting under the bed where I always kept it. But it wasn't there. I bent down on all fours and shoved my head way back under the rusty springs that creaked every time one of us rolled over in the middle of the night, but I saw nothing. A piece of my pigtail got stuck in the spring under the bed, and I had to wiggle and twist it loose before I could jump up and check in the closet. But again, nothing. Then, of course, I thought of Eddie. Every time I came home with something new, he would hold it and smile and play with it till I made him put it back. He loved that box almost as much as I loved it. He had to have it. I found Eddie in the backyard and signed, "You know where my hat box is?" Eddie looked away, playing a game he sometimes played, like you can't be holding him responsible for something if he can't see you. Ask. I knew better. "Eddie," I signed as I stepped back in front of him, knowing he knew. "Where is it? It's mine. I need it now." Eddie sighed, grinned real big, shrugged his shoulders, and signed, "Get on bus." I had enough. "No, Eddie, I don't want to play. Tell me where the box is." Eddie grinned. "Get on bus and I'll show you." Mama always talks about her blood boiling when she gets really mad, and I don't know at what temperature that happens, but I was fairly certain my blood was at the temperature for boiling right then. But knowing Eddie like I did and figuring I had no choice, I took a deep breath and got in line behind my brother as he drove that crazy plate around the backyard like we were on a bus. The more we crisscrossed the yard, the madder I got. Just when my blood was ready to completely boil over, and I was about to jump off that bus and tell Mama, Eddie stopped driving and pointed to a hollowed out spot in the big tree with the tire swing. Right there at the bottom was a little indent, the perfect size for a hidden box of treasures. And there it was. And right beside it was Clarence, like he was guarding it for me until I could do what he knew I needed to do. I signed to Eddie, "Why did you take it?" Eddie moved his hand across his forehead like he was wiping away a memory, the sign for forget, and then he shook his head something fierce. "I don't want to forget," he repeated. I answered by touching his heart, my heart and his. "Don't worry, you won't forget, I promise. We'll never forget. We'll keep everything in here and we'll always remember." Clarence snuggled close to us and nudged us to pet him, and the three of us shared a hug. For a few minutes, I just sat there with Eddie and Clarence next to the hat box, and I knew we were all three remembering Miss Millie. Mama came out and sat down next to us on that bit of grass under the tree. "Are you guys okay out here?" Eddie nodded, wiped his eyes, and went back to the plate driving while I rubbed the hat box like I was petting Clarence. "I think so, but there's still something I have to do for Miss Millie." Mama looked at me and at the hat box, her eyes getting misty again. I looked down at the box to keep my eyes from doing the same, and I read aloud the words on the hat box. "Moveo et proficio." Do you know what that means, Mama? Mama looked at the box and then looked up at the sky. Let me think. I studied Latin years ago. Wait, I should know this. Oh, I remember. Moveo et proficio is Latin for I move and I progress. Didn't that beat all? Did you just make that up right now? And Mama laughed, a real kind of laugh that made me feel more at home than I had felt in a long time. I promise that's what it means. I hugged Mama and told her I had to go do that last thing for Miss Millie. Mama asked if I wanted her to come, but I told her no, I could do this by myself. Well, by myself with Clarence. I hugged Mama and told her I had to go do the last thing for Miss Millie. I grabbed the hat box and Clarence and headed out to the front yard where I ran smack into Jake and Pam. Pam just walked on around onto the backyard to find Eddie, but Jake stopped in front of me. Hey, I wasn't in the mood to chat, but knowing I was heading to where Miss Millie was, it was like she was nudging me to be nice. Hey, I managed back. He nodded to Clarence. Y'all taking care of him now? Uh-huh, I said, bobbing my head up and down. Jake leaned over to pet Clarence, who must have remembered him saving his life and all because his tail started to wag and real happy like. Jake laughed as he pet him some more. I just stood there wanting to go when Jake stopped petting him and looked me right in the eye. She was real nice, wasn't she? I nodded again. And still looking right into my eyes, Jake McHale said the darndest thing. Can I come over sometime? Maybe with Pam, to see the dog and all. And since the boy plumb saved the dog's life, I couldn't very well say no to him, could I? Sure. I nodded again. Jake beamed and stood up. Thanks! And then saw Eddie and Pam walking up front. Pam motioned for Eddie to look at Jake, whose face turned all serious like. He was getting ready to perform a speech he'd been practicing. Go ahead, like I taught ya, Pam encouraged her brother. Jake then signed in a kind of awkward way, hi, Eddie. By the time he got done finger spelling Eddie's name, I wasn't sure which of those boys had a bigger smile on their face. Maybe Pam's smile was the biggest of all. But my own heart wasn't ready to smile just yet. I had to get back to Miss Millie. Clarence and I made it to the cemetery in pretty good time. Somehow, with Miss Millie gone, Clarence didn't mind me walking him at all anymore. But when we got to that old rusty iron gate, I just couldn't go in. My feet froze to the dry and dusty ground. It wasn't because I was scared this time. I knew I needed to get to Miss Millie, but more than that, I knew deep in my heart that when I left her this time, it would really be the last time. She was gone. Miss Millie was gone. I sat down in the dirt right there outside the cemetery. While I was hugging both the hat box and Clarence tight to my chest, my tears, the same tears that had been stuck inside for the last few days, finally decided to fall. Clarence let himself be held like that, even rubbing his head against mine like he was offering himself as a hanky. I cried and I cried some more. Not sure how long we sat like that, but all at once, through my tears, right there at the gate of the cemetery, I heard something behind us. I gasped, making Clarence jump back and growl. My heart started thudding out of fear. And then I saw what was making that noise. Right there, like they all knew I didn't really want to be alone, stood Eddie, Pam, and Jake. What are you guys doing here? I asked, sniffling, wiping my eyes on the back of my arm. Pam spoke first. We know how y'all hate cemeteries, and we had the feeling y'all was headed here. And then she grinned at me. I stood up and I brushed off my sundress and smiled back. Thanks. I looked at each of them standing there. My voice was shaking like I was back on Grandma's bumpy road. Maybe I'm starting to not mind cemeteries so much now, but I sure am glad you guys are here. Eddie grinned and sighed. Never forget. I nodded and turned to walk through the wrought iron gate of the cemetery as everyone followed. Today, we walked away to the back of the cemetery, past the bench under the old oak tree, past the big gravestones, and past all the pretty flowers until I found the gravesite of Miss Millie. The workers had just covered up the grave, so the Georgia clay was glistening red and shiny in the sunshine. Mama promised we would buy her a cross to match Clayton's. I first headed back over to Mr. Clayton's cross and put my hand on it again. Eddie, Pam, and Jake stood back, giving Clarence and me some privacy like I used to do for Miss Millie. Unlike earlier this time, I found some words. Mr. Clayton, I'm happy you and Miss Millie are back together, but I am sorry that she had to leave here to make that happen. And I wish your boy could be with you in this place, but I know you're all together where it really counts. Then I looked at Clarence, who I swear was looking right at me listening. Please take care of Miss Millie for us, okay? Clarence's tooth stuck out even more, like he was telling me that was exactly what he wanted to say. And then I turned to the shining mound of clay, showing me where Miss Millie was buried. I just stood there for a few minutes, not saying anything, but hoping my heart said something I couldn't. Finally, I knelt on the hard Georgia ground. Clarence turned around in a circle like he was trying to figure out how to kneel, but instead he finally sat down next to me. And sitting right there in the back of the cemetery, a panting dog at my side with an audience I never would have expected so close by, I thought about my time in Rainbow. I thought of Daddy and how a small part of me would always be waiting for him even though he might never show up. I thought of Mama and how a big part of me would always be glad she made me go see Miss Millie that one day. And I thought of Miss Millie and me and how different we were. But what made us different wasn't one lick as important as what made us the same. Me and Miss Millie knew that. Then I pulled out the hat box full of all the treasures she shared with me. If a pie plate might help Miss Millie on her journey, one of these treasures surely couldn't hurt. I looked through the box. It was funny. When she gave them to me, they were just things, but now they were so much more. I wasn't sure I could part with any of them. But then I saw it. Miss Ruth's scallop shell. We might all come from different directions, she'd said, but hopefully we all end up in the same place. I pulled it out and I wrapped my fingers around it like the day Miss Millie gave it to me, and then I put it in the spot close to where her cross would go. Then there was one more thing I had to give her. I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my pocket and recited the poem I wrote for her. I'm happy you're in heaven. It's where you deserve to be. But still I know each step I take, you'll always walk with me. I don't know if it was as good as Daddy's poems, but I liked it just fine, and I bet Miss Millie would have too. Writing her a poem felt kind of like talking to her. It made me feel better. I folded the poem back up and put it under Miss Ruth's shell. Picking up the hat box again, I saw my letter. I read it so many times I had it memorized, but I needed to read it again. Alice girl, I've never been one to get all mushy, so no need to start now. But I want to make sure you know that you're a real fine young lady. You said there's no rainbows in Rainbow, but I disagree. You're a rainbow in a sometimes dark world. Keep shining, my Alice girl, keep shining. Love, Mrs. Millie Miller. All right. I looked again at that old hat box thinking about those Latin words and started to think for a hat box it was pretty smart. Maybe sometimes you do have to move to progress and end up where you're supposed to be. But speaking of moving and progressing, I knew for a dang fact that Miss Millie would not want any of us sitting there getting all mushy at the cemetery on her account for much longer. I picked up my hat box of treasures and started walking back to my friends. But before I walked away from Miss Millie's resting place, I looked up to heaven. On this clear summer day, there was not a cloud in the sky, but I swear that there, high in the sky, shining like nobody's business, was the prettiest rainbow I ever did see. I smiled as I heard Miss Millie's voice saying, "Don't that beat all?" And it did. Miss Millie and that rainbow sure did. And that is the end of Walking with Miss Millie. For this final chapter, if you want to reflect on Alice's letter from Miss Millie, or the fact that she decided to leave the shell of Miss Ruth's, with the meaning of Miss Ruth's purpose of that shell was like how we all take our different paths, but we all end up in the same place. So you can think about that. Or you can just tell me how you felt about the book. How did you like it? I hope that you liked it. I know that the last couple of chapters were really difficult to get through for me, and I've read this book before, but it still has such an emotional effect on me. And I thank you guys for listening and doing your reflections with honest emotions. And I appreciate the time you're putting in. And on Monday, we will start our next book, but today, just end with your final thoughts on Walking with Miss Millie. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope that you have a fabulous weekend, and warmer temperatures are right around the corner. So, I will see you guys next week on Monday. Have a great weekend, and I miss you guys so much.